Hello everyone. Today I'm going to do a video on specifically the spacers that go on your front kingpin here. Um, there is some confusion with, what these spacers do and, where to place them when you want to do certain adjustments. I'll do my best in trying to explain this, but first I just want to very briefly explain the kingpin itself. In order for a car to handle, especially the front suspension to handle really well, you want to make sure that this kingpin is perfectly smooth throughout the whole suspension. So what I mean by this is there should be no binding, no friction whatsoever when this kingpin is connected or even fed through the holes here, the upper ball and the lower ball, even the block. You want to make sure that that pin will slide through all these points with ease. Like literally, gravity should be able to pull that pin through. There should be no friction whatsoever generated between these 3 points. Okay. Right now, I've lubricated the actual kingpin with some differential gear. I think it's like 10,000 weight. So I can't really show you right now what I mean by that. But like, you just have to make sure that everything is working smoothly through these points. Okay. All right. So next, I'm going to talk about the shims here. The shims can be placed in different positions on the car here, on the front suspension. Typically, the spacers or shims here can be placed on top of the block. This is your steering block. It can be placed on top of the block, or some shims can be placed on top of the arm here. It really depends on the kit settings and the conditions that you're running in. Now, another thing is like you can put shims underneath the block here. Now, basically, what this does, when you put a shim on from top of here, under here, you're just raising up the block. And by raising up the block, you're actually decreasing the ride height. Okay, that's the simplest way to think of it. When you take a shim from here and put it under here, all you're doing is you are adjusting the ride height, but you are adjusting it by lowering the car down. Okay, same goes with the bulkhead shims. Okay, underneath here, underneath these bulkheads, there are some shims. Now, if you add more shims, you are decreasing the ride height. Okay? And if you are taking out shims, you are increasing the ride height. Okay? So just keep that in mind. So we'll go back to the shims here. So put a shim under here, you will decrease the ride height. Okay? So now, what's the whole point of putting shims at the top here? Well, putting shims on the top of the block will adjust what they call the camber gain or roll center value. All right. And so the best way I can explain it here is you have your suspension arm here, the upper suspension arm. This is the only portion of the suspension that's connected to the bulkhead that moves. Okay. This suspension arm is fixed, so it doesn't move whatsoever. But the upper arm is it freely moves. So when you're adding shims to the upper block here, you're changing the angle of the upper suspension arm. Now, when you change the angle of the upper suspension arm, you are changing the roll center, the way that the car reacts in the corner, and also the camber gain, how much dynamic camber the front end will give when you're in a corner. Now, just very simple way to look at it is if the arm is perfectly flat, you are running a high roll center with very little to no camber gain. When I say little to no, compared to this angle here, you're going to be running quite a bit of camber gain and a low roll center. Okay, so in conditions where you have a high traction condition, running the arm, somewhat relatively flat is always good. You could test it out, see how it works. If you're in need for more steering in the corner, you might consider adding more shims, so changing the angle like so to give you more camber gain in the corners. Okay, but every car is different, every track condition is different, so just test it. That's the best thing you can do, is just testing different shim locations and see how the car reacts and how it reacts with your driving style. So that's basically all the shims on the top do, is it adjusts the angle of the arm, which will affect the camber gain and the roll center positions. Okay, and so you can also, if you want, for example, if you want to have this arm completely flat, and the only way that you can do that is to take most of the shims out, and what you have to do is you have to put the shims on top. Whatever you do, don't just remove the shims and leave them out. What will happen is that will leave a gap, a space in this whole setup right here. And what will happen is you'll have what they call no preload. So preload is the amount of pressure being exerted on the springs. If you remove shims, you're gonna completely remove the preload on the spring, and so you're gonna have like a really sloppy arm like so. Okay, and that's not what you want. Usually the kit setting shims will give you the exact or close to the proper amount of preload for whatever spring that the kit comes with. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Try not to remove the shims from the setup here. You want to try to keep them equal throughout. Say that you want to, adjust the ride height. What you do is you take off the block like so. Take one of the existing springs, existing shim, sorry, and then, I have one underneath already of the block, and then place it on again, and then say that you want to put 2 shims on top of the block, and let's put the next shim, the last final shim on there, on top. All right, and then what you can do is next put your E-clip on and give that a try. So there's many different tuning options with the shims, but I wouldn't stray too far away from the kit settings. They generally have you on target with whatever surface that you're running on. But yeah, just keep in mind that you want to make sure that you maintain the same amount of shims within the front Kingpin setup. Okay, and like I said, when you change the angle of the arm using shims in whatever position, this will affect the front end handling of the car. It will probably either lower the roll center or increase the roll center, and in combination with adjusting those roll centers, you are adjusting the amount of camber gain the car will have going into the corners. Okay, what else can I talk about here while I got this thing rolling? Also, track width adjustments. You can see the shims here. You can add and take out shims, which will adjust the track width. That's something I'll talk about in another video, because I want to talk about the front and rear track widths and how to measure that. But like I said, make sure that you maintain the same amount of shims throughout your Kingpin setup, and yeah, just adjust the shims at whatever position to adjust the ride height. If you want to bring the car down in ride height, you could put a couple of shims underneath here, or if you want to change the camber gain roll center positions, put the shims in there or move them either on top or below depending on your situations. And very quickly, you can also adjust the roll center positions by adjusting the track width and with the spacers on the upper block here, which are just tucked away in here. Okay, but like I said earlier, just maybe just start tuning with this first and see how that affects the handling.